DC Armenian American community know. Not long ago, the AYF family, the AYF Ani chapter of Washington DC, lost one of our Engeruis. Engerui Mara Melkonian was a child of the Washington DC community. She went to Hamastel, she went to Surpach. Her family, every single member of her family was involved in every organization. She was a Hominid Men member, she was a scout, she was a passionate but incredibly sweet young woman. Engerui Mara Melkonian Avedisian is not here, but her words live on, her spirit lives on, and her fight for Armenian genocide recognition, for Harapal, for Armenia, it is our fight. And we are carrying her flag and her spirit with us here today and every day moving forward. Here is her message.
My grandfather Bedros, I carry his image with me. It was probably his passport photo, possibly from when he left France and moved to Lebanon. He constantly changed locations. The photo shows his long, stark white hair. His appearance looked drastically aged, but he was so young at 25. I would always laugh at his ears when I was a kid. They were so large and not proportioned to his head. My father and uncles have the same ears as him. It was always such a funny gene to be passed down with the men in my family. I would sometimes just stare into the picture till my eyes glazed over. I could always tell through the impression on his face that he was scarred. Not the physical scar that can be seen through the human eye, rather deep wounds engraved inside of him. I could just feel it through the look in his eyes. I was 16, and I was about to hear him speak about those deep wounds for the first time. At his feet, I sat on the floor and had begun to document his story with the camera. I was 16 years old when I would hear him speak of this tragedy. Leaning back on the floor with one hand supporting my body and the other hand holding up the video camera, I said, "Okay, Grandpa, I'm ready," as I pressed the record button. I was such a petite, malnourished boy growing up. We were very poor, he began explaining. I knew we were being treated as second-class citizens, but I never realized they could have had such hatred for us. One day, I could hear the Turkish militia on horses entering our village. They were charging into homes one by one, and all I could hear were screams of our neighbors. They finally charged into my home. They just took a look at me and threw me in some well because they found I wasn't worth their bullets. He recalled overhearing the soldiers say, "He is going to die anyways." He continued, "The size of my head was pretty large for such a small boy, so they pounded on my head like a hammer to a nail." My grandfather would explain how he finally fell through the black hole of the well. I felt like I was entering my own hell. As I heard the soldiers' voices fade, I managed to climb myself up and peer my head over the well's rim. My grandfather's lips began to tremble at this point, and his voice became shaky. That's where I saw my mother. He paused to take a breath. As he exhaled, and he added, "And my sister gets skinned in front of me. Then the soldiers killed them, right there for me to see." While holding the video camera, I zoomed in close on his face, and tears start to stream down his wrinkled cheek. Such a strong man, he began crying like a child. I always knew my grandfather was a survivor of the Armenian Genocide, but I had never comprehended the depth of his story. As my grandfather continued his survivor tale, I was being taught one of the biggest untold stories of the 20th century. I don't think a 16-year-old girl, or for that matter, any human being can imagine such ghastliness. It is impossible to convey the despair that has been placed upon my grandfather and his family. At the age of 16, my adolescent mind began to question the way the world worked. My mind was once so naive. Then I began realizing the corruption and immorality in this world. All I could think to myself was, what is the fault of children to be subjected to such suffering? That question has always haunted me, even as it resurfaces today with current situations like Darfur. In retrospect, now I look back to that day videotaping my grandfather speaking. I can't believe at that young age I understood such cruelty in this world. My reserved and shy personality would never give off to others that I am part of a fight. Some could even say it's a revolution. My father is in it. My brother is in it. I am fighting for the respect of my grandfather's tragedy. However, there are many untold stories from the 1.5 million Armenians who perished in these massacres. This Armenian genocide occurred at the brink of World War I in 1915. The Ottoman Empire, present-day Turkey, never did admit to these massacres. Till today, it has not been recognized by them. It's as if it never happened at all. What former President Theodore Roosevelt called the greatest crime of the war, there is a silence placed throughout history. No one became educated and aware of what happened to people like my grandfather. 100 years have passed since this atrocity occurred, and its recognition has spread. Canada and much of Europe have officially recognized this as the Armenian Genocide. However, the United States doesn't officially recognize this genocide due to the country's lucrative economic ties with Turkey.